Commander Kelthus stood on the bridge of his ship, staring at the old data files on his screen. The Valthene Empire had ruled space for thousands of years, and their records held stories of many dead races. One story interested him more than others. It spoke of humans, creatures from a planet called Earth. Most people thought humans were just myths. The old texts described them as strange beings full of contradictions. They were weak but strong at the same time. They felt emotions deeply but could think coldly when needed. They could be kind or violent depending on the situation. The stories said they came from a dangerous world where everything tried to kill them. The weather was deadly, the animals were fierce, and diseases were everywhere. Yet somehow they survived and reached the stars. Kelthus had read these stories many times. He found them entertaining but never believed they were real. How could such creatures actually exist? It seemed impossible. But now, after 2 years of brutal war with the Draxan, he was desperate enough to hope the legends were true. The Draxan Confederation was winning the war. They used terrible biological weapons that changed the Valthene at the genetic level. Soldiers who got infected became something else, something that served the Draxan. The Valthene were running out of options and time. Their empire was crumbling, and they needed help from somewhere, anywhere. During a routine patrol near the war zone, Kelthus received an unusual signal. His communications officer brought it to his attention immediately. The message was ancient, over 500 years old. It had been bouncing through space, moving from one old relay station to another, somehow still functioning after all this time. The language was unknown to the Valthene computers. But the mathematics inside the message were clear. Someone had sent a distress call. The message included coordinates and a name that made Kelthus freeze. Captain Helen Wright of the Earth colonial vessel Meridian. Earth, the home planet of the legendary humans. Kelthus brought this discovery to the High Council on the Valthene homeworld. He expected them to laugh at him or dismiss it as a mistake. Instead, the council members looked at each other with interest. If humans had existed, and if they still existed somewhere, maybe the legends about their abilities were also true. The old texts spoke of incredible medical technology, warriors who never surrendered, and a species that refused to die no matter what the universe threw at them. The council made a decision. They would send Kelthus and a small fleet to investigate the coordinates. If humans were extinct, at least they would solve an ancient mystery. If humans still existed, perhaps they could become allies against the Draxan. The Valthene needed any advantage they could find. 3 weeks later, Kelthus and his research fleet arrived at the coordinates. What they found was unexpected. A warning beacon orbited a green and blue planet. The beacon was old but still working perfectly. When they translated its message, it read clearly in their language systems. Quarantine zone. Human colonization suspended. Return to Sol system for updated navigation charts. Kelthus felt his hopes rise. The beacon mentioned Sol system, the legendary birthplace of humanity. If the charts needed updating, that meant humans were not only real, but had survived long enough to spread to other worlds. They had built an organization capable of managing colonies and creating protocols. This was not the work of a dead civilization, but something was strange. The beacon was over 400 years old based on their scans. Yet there were no colonies on the planet below, no ships in the system, no signs of human activity. Where had they gone? Why abandon a perfectly good world? Kelthus ordered his science teams to study everything they could find. They scanned the planet thoroughly. It was indeed habitable, with abundant water, acceptable atmosphere, and no signs of dangerous life forms. There was no reason humans would not want to live there. Yet the surface showed no cities, no structures, nothing to indicate anyone had ever landed. Over the following days, they found more beacons. Each one marked a different system, and each one carried similar messages. Humans had been here, had claimed these territories, and then had seemingly vanished. The trail of beacons led deeper into what the messages called human space, but there were no humans to be found. The mystery deepened when they discovered an automated mining station in one system. It was harvesting resources from an asteroid field, clearly human in design based on the technology signatures, but no one was aboard. The station operated on its own, sending its collected materials somewhere through a transport system the Valthene could not trace. Kelthus realized something important. Humans had not vanished. They were hiding, The beacons, the automated stations, the lack of visible colonies, it all pointed to a deliberate strategy. Humans were out here somewhere watching and waiting. But why? What were they hiding from? And more importantly, were they watching his fleet right now? He decided to take a risk. Kelthus ordered his communications officer to broadcast a message on all frequencies, translated into every known language, including the ancient human language from their databases. To any humans who can hear this message, we are the Valthine Empire. We mean you no harm. We come seeking knowledge and alliance. We found your ancient distress call and followed it here. Our empire is at war, and we desperately need help. If you are listening, please respond. We offer friendship and cooperation. For 3 days, nothing happened. Kelthus began to think his gamble had failed. Perhaps humans really were extinct, and all these automated systems were just running on old programming. Perhaps he was chasing ghosts across empty space. Then on the 4th day, something appeared on their sensors. A ship had materialized directly in front of his flagship. Their sensors had detected nothing before it appeared. One moment empty space, the next moment a vessel unlike anything in their databases. It was sleek, dark, and covered in patterns that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. A message came through, spoken in perfect Valthine language with no computer translation needed. Commander Kelthus of the Valthine Empire. I am Commander Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Force. On behalf of humanity, we welcome you to our space. However, your presence here requires explanation. We have been watching your fleet since you entered our territory. We know about your war with the Draxon. The question is, what exactly are you hoping to find here? Kelthus stared at the ship on his view screen, his mind racing. The legends were true. Humans were real. They had been watching his fleet the entire time without being detected. Their technology was far more advanced than he had imagined. And now, standing at the edge of first contact with a species that should not exist, Kelthus had to find the right words to ask for their help. The fate of the Valthine Empire might depend on what he said next. Dr. Carl Jensen stood in the medical laboratory, looking at samples through his microscope. What he saw made him feel sick. The Draxon biological weapon was worse than anything he had encountered in 30 years of research. It was not just a disease or a toxin. It was something that rewrote living creatures at their most basic level. 3 weeks had passed since the meeting at Aurora Point. The ISIR human leadership had agreed to send a small medical team to study the Draxon weapon before making any larger commitments. Jensen led the team because he had more experience with biological warfare than almost anyone else in human space. He had spent years studying the old diseases from Earth and developing defenses against potential alien threats. Now he was seeing something that challenged everything he thought he knew. The Draxon weapon was brilliant in a horrible way. It entered a body and began changing the genetic code. The victim did not die. Instead, they slowly transformed into something new, something that could no longer think independently. They became part of the Draxon collective, their minds linked to the hive consciousness. The process took weeks and was apparently painful, but there was no way to stop it once it started. At least that was what the Valthine believed. Jensen worked with a team of 20 human scientists and doctors in a secure facility on a Valthine border station. They had access to samples, medical records, and even a few victims in the early stages of infection who had volunteered for study. The Valthine doctors watched everything the humans did with intense interest and growing hope. After 2 weeks of constant work, Jensen sent an encrypted message back to Earth. This is worse than we thought. The weapon is adaptive and self-modifying. It learns from each victim and becomes harder to fight. Recommend full military deployment. We cannot let this spread any further. On Earth, in the Defense Council chambers, Jensen's message caused immediate debate. Fleet Admiral Karen White read the report aloud to the assembled leaders. The details were frightening. If the Draxon perfected this weapon, they could potentially use it against any biological species. Humanity would not be safe even in their hidden systems. Admiral Paul Carter, who had argued for caution at every step, now changed his position. We cannot wait any longer. If we allow the Draxon to continue developing this weapon, they will eventually be unstoppable. We need to act now while we still have an advantage. Prime Minister Richard Cole had spent his entire career advocating for humanity to remain hidden. He had been one of the youngest survivors of the Krill War, and remembered the terror of nearly losing Earth itself. For decades he had pushed for isolation, for safety through invisibility. Now he stood before the council and spoke words that surprised everyone present. We built an entire civilization based on the idea that we needed to hide until we were strong enough to defend ourselves. We created ships, weapons, and soldiers that could match anything in the galaxy. We told ourselves it was just preparation, just in case we ever needed to fight again. I think we all knew this day would come. We just hoped it would not be in our lifetime. He paused and looked around the room at the other leaders. The Draxen are using a weapon designed for genocide. They are not just fighting a war. They are trying to erase entire species. If we stand by and let this happen because we are afraid of being noticed, then what have we become? What was the point of surviving the Krill War if we lose our humanity in the process? The vote was unanimous. Humanity would deploy a full battle group to assist the Valthene. But first they would give the Draxen one chance to end this peacefully. It was the human way, to offer mercy before unleashing violence. Admiral White personally recorded the message that would be sent to the Draxen leadership. She sat in her office on the Lunar Defense Station, wearing her full dress uniform, and spoke calmly into the camera. To the Draxen Confederation, this is Fleet Admiral Karen White of the Earth Defense Force. You do not know us, but we have been watching you. We know about your war with the Valthene. We know about the biological weapons you use. We are giving you 72 hours to cease all hostilities and enter negotiations. If you refuse, you will face humanity in combat. You should understand that we do not make this threat lightly. To prove humanity's capabilities, a single stealth ship had infiltrated the Draxen home system. It mapped every military base, every shipyard, and every weapons facility. The coordinates were included with the message as proof that humanity could reach them whenever they wanted. The ship completed its mission and left without ever being detected. The message was transmitted directly to the Draxen High Command, bypassing all their security systems and appearing on every command ship simultaneously. The demonstration of technological superiority was impossible to ignore. Humanity wanted the Draxen to understand exactly what they were facing. The response came in 60 hours, faster than expected. But it was not a surrender or a request for negotiation. Instead, the Draxen launched their largest offensive yet. They sent nearly their entire fleet to attack the Valthene homeworld, intending to end the war immediately before this new threat could fully materialize. It was a desperate gamble and a fatal mistake. Captain Jake Morrison, now promoted and given command of the carrier ship Defiant, received the alert within minutes. The human battle group had been positioned in a nearby system, waiting for the Draxen response. Now they moved to intercept. The battle group consisted of 5 carriers, 20 destroyers, and 30 frigates. By galactic standards, it was a modest force. The Draxen fleet outnumbered them 3-1. But numbers were not everything, especially when technology and tactics were vastly different. Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiant, surrounded by holographic displays showing the tactical situation. His crew worked with practiced efficiency, each person knowing their role perfectly. They had trained for years in simulations. Now they would discover if their preparation was sufficient. The Draxen fleet arrived at the Valthene homeworld expecting to overwhelm the defenders quickly. Instead, they found themselves facing something they could not understand. Human ships moved in ways that should not be possible, accelerating and turning faster than physics should allow. Their point defense systems shot down missiles that were supposedly too fast to intercept. Their weapons reached across distances that should have been beyond range. Morrison ordered the fighter squadrons to launch. Hundreds of small craft poured from the carriers, moving with coordination that looked like a single organism. They swept through the Draxen formation, targeting weapon systems and engines with surgical precision. Each fighter pilot was linked to the others through quantum communication systems, allowing them to act as one unit. But the real shock came when human Marines began boarding Draxen vessels. They wore powered armor that increased their strength and speed dramatically. They moved through enemy ships like forces of nature, unstoppable and precise. Every Draxen they encountered was subdued, not killed unless absolutely necessary. Humanity wanted to capture the bioweapons and ensure they could never be used again. The battle lasted 14 hours. When it ended, the Draxen fleet was retreating in chaos, leaving behind dozens of destroyed ships. Not a single human vessel had been lost, though several showed damage from the fighting. In the aftermath, as rescue operations began and the Valthene surveyed the battlefield in stunned silence, a new message came from the Draxen. We underestimated you. We did not believe the warnings. We request terms for negotiation." Morrison looked at the message and felt no satisfaction. War was never something to celebrate even when you won. He opened a channel to Admiral White back on Earth and reported the results. Then he contacted Commander Kelthus on the Valthene flagship. "The immediate threat is over," Morrison said. "Your homeworld is safe. Now we need to make sure this never happens again. We need to build a real peace, not just a pause between wars." Kelthus appeared on the view screen, his crystalline features showing emotions Morrison was beginning to recognize. Relief, gratitude, and something else. Perhaps awe at what he had just witnessed. "Commander Morrison, Captain Morrison, I do not have words. Your people saved us. The legends did not do you justice," Morrison smiled slightly. "The legends never tell the full story. We are not heroes from myths. We are just people who learned hard lessons and refuse to forget them. Now let us make sure the Draxan learn those same lessons without more dying." The Galactic Assembly had never seen anything like this before. Representatives from 23 different species gathered in orbit above Earth, the legendary homeworld that most had thought was just a myth. They came from all corners of known space, curious to see the planet that had produced humanity, and to understand what role humans would play in galactic affairs. Ambassador Susan Blake stood at the podium, looking out at the assembled delegates. She had prepared her speech carefully, knowing that her words would be analyzed and debated for years to come. This was humanity's moment to define itself for the galaxy. "Welcome to Earth," she began. "Thank you for making the journey here. I know many of you have questions about humanity, about our technology, about our intentions. I will do my best to answer those questions honestly." She activated a holographic display showing Earth rotating slowly. "This is where we come from. A beautiful planet, but also a dangerous one. When humans evolved here, we faced threats constantly. Diseases that killed millions. Predators that hunted us. Weather that could freeze or burn us. Earthquakes, floods, volcanic eruptions. Our planet seemed determined to make us extinct." The display changed to show various animals from Earth. Tigers, sharks, bears, poisonous snakes, and spiders. The creatures we shared our world with were often stronger, faster, and better armed than us. We survived not because we were the best at anything, but because we learned to adapt, to cooperate, and to never give up. She paused, letting the images sink in. "When we finally developed space travel, we rushed out to meet the galaxy with excitement and hope. We thought everyone would be friendly. We were wrong. The krill swarm nearly destroyed us. Billions died. Our colonies were burned. Earth itself was threatened. We survived, but barely." The display now showed images of the Krill War, destroyed cities, burning ships, and finally the retreat back to Sol system. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others watched with fascination. After the Krill War, we made a choice. We could have stayed angry and bitter. We could have become isolationist and xenophobic. Instead, we chose to learn. We spent 600 years watching the galaxy, studying other species and asking ourselves important questions. Why do conflicts happen? How can they be prevented? What makes some civilizations succeed while others fail? Blake smiled slightly. What we learned is that most problems come from misunderstanding and fear. Species fight because they do not trust each other. They do not trust because they do not understand each other. And they do not understand because they do not communicate honestly. She gestured to the assembled delegates. That is what we are trying to do now. Communicate honestly. Yes, humanity has advanced technology. Yes, our military is powerful. But those things are not what define us. What defines us is our belief that every species deserves a chance to survive and prosper. Every species, even former enemies like the Draxan, can change and grow. One of the delegates, a representative from the Corthan Federation, stood and asked permission to speak. Blake nodded, and the delegate's translator began working. Ambassador Blake, your words are reassuring. But many species are concerned. You remained hidden for 6 centuries, watching us without revealing yourselves. How can we trust that you do not have secret plans or hidden agendas? Blake had expected this question. That is fair. Trust must be earned, not demanded. We understand your concerns. That is why we are opening our borders to diplomatic missions from any interested species. That is why we are sharing some of our medical technology freely. That is why we are being transparent about our capabilities and intentions. She paused, then continued. But I will be honest about one thing. Humanity will defend itself and its allies aggressively if threatened. We have learned the cost of being unprepared. We will never allow another Krill War to happen. We hope that our strength will prevent conflicts rather than cause them. A strong defense often makes offense unnecessary. Over the following days, delegates toured Earth and several human colonies. They visited medical research facilities where human scientists worked on cures for various diseases. They saw manufacturing centers where advanced technology was produced. They attended cultural events showcasing human art, music, and literature. Many delegates were surprised by what they found. Humans were not cold warriors focused only on military power. They were people who valued family, friendship, creativity, and beauty. They laughed, cried, argued, and made mistakes just like any other species. The legends had made them seem larger than life. The reality was both more ordinary and more impressive. Commander Kelthus gave several presentations about the Draxan War and humanity's intervention. He spoke honestly about his initial skepticism, his desperation, and his amazement at what he discovered. "Humans saved my species from extinction," he told the assembled delegates. "But more importantly, they taught us valuable lessons. They showed us that mercy is not weakness. They demonstrated that former enemies can become allies. And they proved that advancing together is better than fighting alone." Dr. Carl Jensen presented his research on the Draxan biological weapons and the treatments his team had developed. The medical breakthroughs had applications far beyond just treating weapon victims. Human medical science, developed over centuries of dealing with Earth's dangerous biology, was now being shared with other species. Diseases that had plagued civilizations for generations suddenly had potential cures. But not everyone was happy about humanity's emergence. A few species saw humans as a threat to the existing galactic order. They worried that human technology would make their own militaries obsolete. They feared that human economic power would dominate trade routes. Some simply resented that a species thought to be mythical had been real all along. Blake spent many hours in private meetings with concerned delegates trying to address their fears. She explained repeatedly that humanity was not interested in domination or control. They simply wanted to live peacefully and help others do the same. Some delegates left convinced. Others remained suspicious. 3 months after the Galactic Assembly, the first major test of human intentions came. A small species called the Ventari faced invasion from a larger neighbor who wanted their resource-rich homeworld. The Ventari sent a desperate plea to the Assembly asking for help. Most species debated what to do, unwilling to commit forces to a conflict that did not directly concern them. Humanity responded within hours. A small battle group arrived in Ventari space and positioned themselves between the invading fleet and the homeworld. Admiral Paul Carter, commanding the group, sent a simple message to the invaders. "The Ventari are now under the protection of the Earth Defense Force. If you attack them, you attack us. We strongly encourage you to reconsider your plans and enter negotiations instead." The invaders, having heard about humanity's performance against the Draxan, withdrew immediately. The conflict ended without a single shot being fired. The Ventari were saved by the mere presence of human ships and the reputation humanity had built. Word of this incident spread quickly. Humanity had backed up their words with actions, defending a small species that had no strategic value and offered nothing in return. It was exactly the kind of behavior that built trust and demonstrated genuine commitment to galactic peace. Over the following year, humanity continued to establish itself in the galactic community. Trade agreements multiplied. Cultural exchanges became common. Human tourists visited alien worlds while aliens toured Earth cities and natural wonders. Slowly, the suspicion and fear began to fade, replaced by cooperation and friendship. Commander Jake Morrison, now Admiral Morrison and head of the Joint Human-Valthian Defense Initiative, stood in his office looking at reports from across the region. 23 new species had requested diplomatic relations with humanity. 14 joint research projects were underway. 8 trade routes had been established. And most importantly, no new conflicts had erupted since the Draxan War ended. His communicator chimed and Kelthus appeared on the screen. The Valthian admiral had become not just an ally but a genuine friend over the past year. "Morrison, I just received interesting news. The Draxan have requested permission to send a delegation to Earth. They want to apologize formally and discuss long-term cooperation." "What do you think?" Morrison considered the question. A year ago, the Draxan had been bitter enemies. Now they were asking to build bridges. It was exactly the kind of transformation that made all the difficult work worthwhile. "I think we should welcome them," Morrison replied. "That is what we do, right? We give people chances to be better than they were. Kelthus's crystalline features conveyed something that might have been a smile. Indeed, sometimes I forget that humans are just as capable of wisdom as they are of warfare. Morrison laughed. We try. We do not always succeed, but we keep trying. That is the best any of us can do. Years later, historians from multiple species would look back at this period as a turning point in galactic history. The emergence of humanity had changed everything, not because humans were superior or perfect, but because they brought a different perspective shaped by their unique experiences. They remembered what it felt like to nearly go extinct. They understood the value of second chances. They believed in building rather than... Commander Jake Morrison sat in his chair aboard the Vanguard, watching the Valthene ships on his displays. His crew was silent, waiting for orders. They all understood the significance of this moment. After 600 years of hiding, humanity was about to reveal itself to the galaxy once again. Morrison had been chosen for this assignment because of his experience and judgment. He had spent 15 years patrolling the borders of human space, watching other species come and go, making sure none of them discovered the truth. Humanity had learned to be patient, to observe before acting. The last time they rushed into the galactic community, it had nearly destroyed them. 6 centuries ago, humanity had built their first faster-than-light ships and exploded into space with excitement and hope. They met other species, shared technology, and believed they were joining a peaceful galactic community. Then they encountered the Krill swarm, a species that saw humanity as nothing more than resources to be consumed. The war that followed killed billions and pushed humanity to the edge of extinction. The survivors learned a hard lesson. The galaxy was not a safe place. Being friendly and open could get you killed. So humanity retreated to their core systems, developed new technology in secret, and watched the galaxy from hiding. They used stealth systems that made their ships invisible to nearly all sensors. They built listening posts disguised as asteroids and comets. They learned everything about the species around them while revealing nothing about themselves. Now the Valthene had come looking for the legendary humans, and Morrison had to decide whether to stay hidden or step into the light. He had already made his choice by decloaking his ship. Now he needed to follow through. Captain Lisa Park contacted him from the Lunar Defense Station back in the Sol system. She was his superior officer and had the authority to override his decisions, but she had given him permission to make first contact if he thought the situation warranted it. "Morrison, what is your assessment?" she asked. Morrison looked at the data his crew had gathered on the Valthene fleet. They are desperate but not aggressive. Their ships are damaged from recent battles. They have been broadcasting requests for contact for 3 days, not trying to hide or gather intelligence. I believe they genuinely want an alliance, not a conquest. There was a pause as Park considered his words. Other voices joined the conversation. Admiral Paul Carter wanted more caution. Dr. Susan Blake argued they needed to learn more about the Draxan threat before committing to anything. The debate went on for 20 minutes while the Valthene waited for a response. Finally, Park made the decision. "Morrison, you have authorization for limited contact. Arrange a meeting at a neutral location. Get their story. Assess their intentions but make no promises about military assistance. We need to understand the full situation before humanity reveals its strength." Morrison acknowledged the orders and opened a channel to the Valthene flagship. "Commander Kelthus, thank you for your patience. We will meet with you to discuss your situation. I am transmitting coordinates to a neutral station on the edge of our territory. Come alone with minimal escort. We will do the same. If you try to bring weapons or recording devices beyond what we specify, we will know, and the meeting will end immediately." Kelthus agreed without hesitation. Morrison could hear the relief in his voice. The Valthene commander probably thought the hard part was over. He had found the humans and secured a meeting, but Morrison knew the real challenges were just beginning. 3 days later, both ships arrived at Aurora Point, a small human outpost that few people knew existed. It was deliberately simple, just a basic station with meeting rooms and life support. Morrison brought Dr. Blake and Lieutenant Amy Rogers with him. Blake was a specialist in alien cultures and biology. Rogers was a tactical officer who could assess military capabilities and threats. When the Valthene delegation entered the conference room, Morrison studied them carefully. Kelthus was tall with crystalline skin that reflected light in interesting patterns. His 2 advisors were similar in appearance but smaller. They moved with grace and seemed genuinely curious about the humans. Kelthus began speaking as soon as everyone was seated. Commander Morrison, Dr. Blake, I will be direct with you. My people are dying. The Draxen use biological weapons that rewrite our genetic code. Those who are infected become slaves to the Draxen collective mind. We have fought for 2 years and lost dozens of worlds. Our scientists cannot find a cure or defense. Then we found the ancient message from Captain Wright and followed the trail here. He paused, then continued. Our legends say humans come from a death world where diseases and dangers shaped your evolution. The stories claim you have medical knowledge and biological resistance beyond anything in the known galaxy. We are asking, begging if necessary, for your help. Not for free. We will share everything we have, all our knowledge, all our resources. We just need a chance to survive. Blake leaned forward, her expression sympathetic but controlled. Commander Kelthus, your situation is terrible and we do sympathize. But you need to understand our position. 600 years ago, humanity tried to join the galactic community. We were excited and naive. We shared our technology freely and trusted those we met. Then we were nearly exterminated by a species that saw us as prey. We survived by retreating and hiding. She gestured to the stars visible through the viewport. Since then, we have been watching the galaxy. We have seen 17 major wars, countless smaller conflicts, and the rise and fall of empires. We learned that rushing in without full information leads to disaster. So before we can even consider helping you, we need to understand everything about your war, your enemy, and what our involvement would mean. Rogers activated a holographic display showing the Valthene-Draxen conflict. We have been monitoring your war since it began. What concerns us most is the nature of the Draxen biological weapons. They are not designed just to win battles. They permanently alter captured populations. That suggests your enemy wants to either absorb everyone they conquer or eliminate them entirely. This is not a war over territory or resources. This is something much more dangerous. Kelthus looked at the humans with a mixture of hope and fear. You have been watching us this whole time. For 2 years, while my people died, you were observing? Morrison nodded slowly. Yes, and before that, we watched your empire for decades. We also watched the Draxen. We have been watching hundreds of species across this entire region of space. That is what we do now. We observe, we learn, and we protect ourselves by understanding everything around us. It may seem cold, but it is how we survived when others wanted us dead. The Valthene commander stood and paced around the room. His crystalline features somehow conveyed deep emotion. Then you must know we are losing. You must know the Draxen will not stop with us. They will continue expanding. Eventually, they will find your hidden worlds. What will you do then? Blake and Morrison exchanged glances. It was the question they had been asking themselves. Rogers spoke up. You are right. The Draxen expansion will eventually threaten us. That is one reason we decided to reveal ourselves now. But you need to understand something about humans. We do not do anything halfway. If we enter your war, we will not just send medical supplies and advice. When humanity commits to a fight, we commit with everything we have. The question for you is whether you are prepared for what that means. Kelthus stopped pacing and looked directly at Morrison. I do not understand. What are you saying? Morrison stood and walked to the viewport. I am saying that the humans in your legends, the ones who survived a death world and reached the stars, those humans still exist. 600 years of isolation did not make us soft. It made us stronger, smarter, and more dangerous. If we help you fight the Draxen, they will learn why some species should have remained as myths and legends. They will learn what happens when you threaten a species that evolved by refusing to die. Are you prepared for the galaxy to see that side of humanity? The room fell silent. Kelthus slowly sat back down, beginning to understand that he had not just found potential allies. He had found something that might change the balance of power across the entire region of space. The legends about humans, it seemed, had not told the full story. The Grand Chamber on Valthene Prime had hosted diplomatic meetings for thousands of years. Its walls were covered with crystals that recorded the history of every important negotiation, every treaty signed, every alliance formed. Now it would record something unprecedented: the surrender of the Draxen Confederation and the emergence of humanity as a galactic power. Admiral Karen White sat across from Coordinator Zethis, the representative of the Draxen High Command. Between them sat Commander Kelthus, representing the Valthene Empire. Behind each delegation were advisors, witnesses, and guards. The room was filled with representatives from a dozen other species who had come to observe this historic moment. White had arrived on Valthene Prime 2 days earlier aboard her flagship, the Roosevelt. Her presence demonstrated how seriously humanity took these negotiations. She was not just a military commander but also a diplomat who understood that winning the peace was harder than winning the war. Zethus was unlike any being White had encountered before. The Draxan communicated through a combination of scent chemicals and vocalizations. A translation device allowed others to understand them, but something was always lost in translation. White had learned to watch their body language, the way their limbs moved, the colors that flowed across their skin. "Let us begin," White said calmly. The Draxan Confederation attacked the Valthene Empire using biological weapons designed for genocide. You continued that attack even after being warned to stop. You now face 2 choices. Accept the terms we offer, or face the combined might of humanity and the Valthene until your civilization is completely dismantled. I prefer the first option, but we are prepared for either. Zethus released a scent that the translator interpreted as resignation mixed with confusion. "We do not understand you. You defeated our fleet easily. You could have destroyed every ship, killed every crew member. Instead, you disabled our vessels and captured our soldiers. You could have bombed our homeworld from orbit. Instead, you sent medical teams to treat our wounded. Why? What do you gain from showing mercy to your enemies?" Captain Morrison, attending as a military advisor, answered the question. "Because we understand something that many species forget. Today's enemy might be tomorrow's ally. The Valthene were strangers to us a month ago. Now we fight alongside them. Who knows what relationship humanity and the Draxan might have in the future? We believe in giving people chances to change, to be better than they were." He paused, then continued. "But make no mistake, mercy is not weakness. We are offering you these terms once. If you refuse, if you ever use biological weapons again, if you threaten any species with genocide, we will not be merciful a second time. We will end your civilization completely. That is not a threat. It is a promise." White laid out the terms clearly. The Draxan would surrender all biological weapons to a joint oversight committee. Human scientists would work with Draxan researchers to safely destroy the weapons and develop treatments for anyone already infected. The Draxan would withdraw from all territories they had captured during the war. They would accept observers from both humanity and the Valthene to ensure compliance. In exchange, humanity would help the Draxan transition their economy away from conquest and toward trade. Zethus listened to the terms without interruption. When White finished, the Draxan coordinator was silent for several minutes. The other delegates in the room waited nervously. Finally, Zethus released a scent pattern the translator interpreted as acceptance mixed with shame. "We agree to your terms. We accept that we were wrong. We believed might alone determined who survived and who perished. You have shown us a different path. We will take it." The treaty was signed within hours. Holographic documents were prepared in multiple languages and legal formats. Each delegate added their mark or signature. The crystals on the walls recorded everything for history. The war that had killed millions and threatened to destroy the entire sector was officially over. But the real work was just beginning. In the weeks following the treaty signing, human teams spread across both Valthene and Draxan space. Dr. Jensen led the medical efforts, working with local scientists to treat victims of the biological weapons. His team discovered that the weapon could be reversed in most cases if caught early enough. For those in later stages, they developed treatments that at least prevented the condition from worsening. The work was difficult and often heartbreaking. Jensen spent long hours in medical facilities, watching victims slowly recover their original minds and bodies. Some thanked him. Others were angry at what had been done to them. A few could not be saved and had to be kept in isolated facilities where they could not harm themselves or others. But every person saved was a victory against the horror of biological warfare. On Earth, the revelation of humanity's existence had caused massive changes. For 600 years, humans had lived with the knowledge that they were hiding from the galaxy. Children grew up learning about the Krill War and why isolation was necessary. Now, suddenly that was over. Humanity was no longer hiding. The galaxy knew they existed, and reactions were mixed. Some species welcomed the news. They saw potential allies and trading partners. Others were frightened by the demonstration of human military power. A few were angry that humanity had been watching them without revealing itself. Diplomatic teams worked overtime to establish relationships, explain humanity's history, and build trust. Dr. Susan Blake, now appointed as humanity's first ambassador to the galactic community, spent her days meeting with representatives from different species. She listened to their concerns, answered their questions, and tried to help them understand humanity's perspective. It was exhausting work, but she believed it was the most important job she had ever done. "We are not trying to conquer anyone," she explained repeatedly to various delegations. "We are not trying to control galactic politics. We simply want to exist peacefully and trade with our neighbors. Yes, we have advanced technology and powerful weapons, but we also have bitter memories of nearly being exterminated. We use our strength to protect ourselves and our allies, not to threaten others." Admiral Kelthus, now promoted and appointed as the Valthene liaison to humanity, worked closely with Blake. The two species began joint projects that would benefit both civilizations. A shared military academy was established to train officers from both cultures. Trade agreements were signed covering everything from raw materials to entertainment. Scientists collaborated on research projects that combined Valthene crystal technology with human computer systems. 6 months after the first contact, Morrison stood with Kelthus on the observation deck of the new joint headquarters station. Below them, construction crews from both species worked together building something unprecedented. The station would serve as a neutral meeting place, a training facility, and a symbol of cooperation. "I have been thinking about what you told me at Aurora Point," Kelthus said, "about how humans commit completely to whatever they do. I understand now. You did not just help us win a war. You are helping us build something better." Morrison watched the construction crews below. "That is what we learned during our isolation. Victory is not about defeating enemies. It is about creating situations where future conflicts become unnecessary. The galaxy is vast. There is room for everyone if we work together." Down on Earth, in schools across the planet, children learned new lessons. They still studied the Krill War and its terrible cost. But now they also learned about first contact with the Valthene, the war with the Draxan, and the peace that followed. They learned that humanity's strength came not from weapons or technology, but from their refusal to give up and their willingness to help others. The legends about humans had spread across the galaxy for centuries. Now those legends were being rewritten. Humans were not mythical warriors or impossible contradictions. They were real people who had survived terrible challenges and learned important lessons. They brought those lessons to the stars, not as conquerors but as partners. And across the galaxy, other species watched and wondered what this meant for the future. The sleeping giant had awakened. The legends had become reality. Nothing would ever be the same.